going to start the car. Just as engine. Not start, stop, just engine. Before we go anywhere, I just want to say something about this car, because I know it costs £2.5 million. But the thing it's always really hard to get across in a video, the thing I can't tell you, really without you being in here and being able to touch everything, is just the tactility of everything. It feels like that much money in all the controls. It might look like this is effectively lifted from an R8, albeit machined from one piece of billet aluminium and all that, but the switch down here, so oily. It's just, you won't feel a switch like it in any other car.
From the vents to the gear selector to the stitching on the leather, a Bugatti has a depth of quality to the materials behind each click, slide, push or rotation that can never be fully conveyed simply by sight alone. You really need to feel it. Consider for a moment a Michelin-starred plate of food on a television screen. However beautifully arranged it is on a plate and however well you might think you know the individual ingredients, it's only by actually tasting it that you can understand the true magic inherent in it. And so it is with the Chiron. Although, however much you like the Bugatti, I wouldn't actually advocate licking it.
But what's it like to drive? I think we better find out. What I really wanted to get out of driving the Chiron today was to discover not what it's like in a straight line, because everybody said that, let's face it. It's almost impossible to describe just how chuffing fast it is. But what I really want to know is what this car is like when you find a good piece of back road with some twists and turns in it, changes in camber, a good B road.
Luckily, hidden in the hills not far from the Bugatti factory is the perfect stretch of tarmac. Tricky enough to test the Chiron, yet still just wide enough that it doesn't feel like a speedboat in a swimming pool. But just before we get there is one quick detour I want to make.
As we're driving the Chiron on the roads around Molsheim, there was one particular place that I wanted to stop, and that's here. This is the memorial to Jean Bugatti, who was killed here testing the Type 57C tank, which had just won Le Mans in 1939. And this is the account. 11th of August, 1939. At the end of the day, the series of tests are over. Mr. Jean and his mechanic, Robert, get out of the car and smoke a cigarette. Suddenly Jean says, "Wait a minute, I'm just going to drive up and down again. Robert, watch how the car behaves over this bump." Jean turns at the Duttelnheim crossroads, speeds the car up into a furious acceleration and tops 200 kilometers an hour. Suddenly, a cyclist pedals out of a mud track. Trying to avoid him, Jean crashes into a tree on the right-hand side of the road. The car literally explodes, leaving Jean with no chance of survival. It was very tragic, and to be honest, Bugatti really never recovered from this. At the time, Jean had taken over pretty much the day-to-day running and business in total from Ettore, his father. And some of the most beautiful, iconic cars that Bugatti ever produced, things like the Atlantic, which you can still see in the Chiron today, and that spine down the ridge and the split rear window, was Jean's design. The accident actually took place up there. The road carried straight on in those days. And it seems only appropriate to pay respects to a man who gave so much to Bugatti.
Poignant pilgrimage made, it's time to see if the Chiron is a car that Jean and Ettore might have been proud of.
So, we have EB mode, which is effectively auto mode. Then we go to Autobahn mode, which gives the car some rake and puts the rear wing up a bit. Then we have the handling mode. Now that stiffens the suspension, it relaxes the stability control, it adds some weight to the steering, and adds another 4 degrees to that rear wing. And this is a Chiron in full attack. When you really get after the car, yes, it shrinks the road between the corners, and how the braking is just superb. You need to get the car into the corners. It's obviously got a lot of weight behind you, but it's actually really well controlled. So it doesn't feel like you've got a big old rucksack on your back. You need to be patient with the throttle. You want to get the nose into the corner, and then you actually want to be back on the throttle, building that boost through the corners. The steering has beautiful weight to it. Oh. So you want to be on the power early in the corner, then you unleash it. The second question that I really wanted to answer is, how does this differ from a Veyron? Is it just a tweaked version of the old car? And the biggest difference for me is in the corners, because the Veyron, you never really felt like you wanted to push it in the corners, lean on the tyres too much, because you felt like you wouldn't really know what was going on. This is so much better. It actually feels encouraging when you turn in. You can feel the front, but more importantly, you can feel the rear of the car, so you feel like you can manage the weight, particularly as you go downhill. If you trail brake into corners, yes, you feel the weight trying to overtake you a bit, but you can manage it. Around these hairpins, it feels like a lighter car than I'd imagined. It really changes direction, belying its 2 tons. The steering weight is absolutely spot on, and you can actually get it moving around a little bit on the exit of corners even, which is not something I expected at all. It's got that very definite sort of agile 4-wheel drive way of driving. There, you just feel it on the outside of the wheel. Brilliant through the cambers and the way that it disguises its weight. It's not intrusive, it's not fidgety at all, far from it. They've changed the tyre widths compared to a Veyron, so we've got 285s at the front, 355s at the rear. That's larger at the front but smaller at the rear than before, to give it a slightly pointier feeling, and you really do feel that. Yes, you have to wait mid-corner to get back on the throttle, but you can really get it into the corners, use the brakes to get the nose in, and then enjoy all that huge power.
In some ways, dynamically, it feels like a sort of monstrous, incredible Hulk version of an Audi R8. No, it can't disguise its weight entirely, but once you've seen the size of the monstrous engine and gearbox, you understand why it weighs a whisker under 2 tons. And you also wonder how it manages to disguise that mass as well as it does. It's also worth remembering that if the Chiron was 300 kilos lighter, it simply wouldn't be as quick, as it wouldn't be able to deploy all its power so effectively. I remember exactly the same argument being put forward by the engineers of the R35 Nissan GT-R, another heavy but stunningly effective car.
There were really 2 things that I wanted to get out of today, I suppose. I wanted to find out what the Chiron was like on a tight, twisty road, not just a fast, straight one, which is where everyone really sees it. And I also wanted to find out how different it is to the Veyron. And in many ways, those 2 things are very much interconnected, because I think the biggest difference really is how the car feels on those roads. The Veyron was always better, I think, than people actually ever gave it credit for, down a twisting piece of road, but you never felt like you wanted to push it to the limit of its tyres. It was capable and fast, but it wasn't necessarily that interactive. This is a very different proposition. You can really hustle it. The ability to turn into a downhill corner that feels a bit off camber and feel the car just get slightly out of shape, or to be on the throttle early, waking up those turbos. And you do have to get on the throttle just a bit early because it's not instantaneous, and then ride the power out and feel that outside rear wheel just over rotating a little bit is extraordinary. And yeah, the connection with the tyres in the Chiron is much greater through the steering and through your backside, through the seat of your pants.
The Chiron's ability to do over 260 miles an hour is what defines so much of this car. Its status, its allure, its physical properties, and people's perception that it is a one-trick pony. And it's that last point that I wanted to get to the bottom of. While I hit some more than decent numbers in the Chiron, I didn't get anywhere near that incredible top speed during my time with it. And I suppose the big question is, did I come away feeling like I'd missed out as a result? If you don't experience that big straight line figure, if you take it to a more conventional performance car playground and judge it by parameters that ignore that headline number, does it still thrill and impress? The answer? Absolutely.